I beat myself. Literally. Slaps, punches, words. The words hurt the most. What is wrong with you? You're so stupid. You're such an idiot. Why can't you do anything right? You're so useless. I don't even remember what I had done wrong, what mistake I made, but that's how I reacted. I had thought I failed in my attempts to uphold my family's expectations well. Expectations instilled in me from the time I was little, like we've all had, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Respect, decorum, effort, they all matter. Expectations have a place, but they can also carry a heavy weight, where instead of being a guiding light to healthy, happy, successful human beings, they're a burden, internalized in the most unhelpful ways. For me, it was internalized as the need to be perfect, an unattainable goal that I would always fail at. Every mistake a reminder that I could never do anything right. A fear, a belief that I held even in my parenting. I recall a day when we all went for a routine eye exam. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, my husband, whom they thought was her brother, and myself, apparently mom to them both. The nerve. They ran their scans, created their reports, and then it was time for the visual reading test, where you get to prove your amazing vision by reading off the letters projected in front of you. 2020, hey? Displayed were the letters B, D, P, T, O. My daughter read A, 4, B, 7, D, and then she smiled. The assistant switched the slide. Try this one, honey. She squinted, read off some more ridiculous combinations. All right, now stop playing around. The assistant's like, it's okay. She's doing fine. No, it's not. She knows her letters and numbers. To my daughter, you play too much. Knock it off. Now, of course, she started to get nervous. If I had been paying attention to her needs and who she was at her core, I would have recognized that something was wrong. But she was misbehaving, and it was embarrassing. And so I threatened her. You're gonna get a spanking. You want me to tell Daddy? Smart little cookie knew that the letters were being projected from behind her. And so one by one, she turned to read the letter, turned back to the wall to say the letter. Turns out, she was nearsighted with astigmatism, developing a lazy eye, and needed glasses at 5. And I had berated her. I had attacked my child with the same verbal whips I had given myself for not meeting my expectations, which were born out of the need to be perfect, that fear of failure and what I had made that mean, a meaning I had given it based on mistakes I made. Years later, ironically, I'm working with youth, namely adolescents. Yes, teenagers. Dun, dun, dun. That age bracket indeed. I've been a teacher, a tutor. I've been a mentor. I'm currently a life coach for teenagers and young adults. And you know what? Teenagers and young adults are inherently great. There is a seed of greatness inside each of them. They just don't often believe it. Do you remember what it's like to be a teenager? 14, 15, 16. maybe officially becoming one at 13, straddling the line into adulthood at 17, 18, 19. Do you remember the excitement of youth, the carefreeness, the possibilities ahead of you? Do you remember what you looked like? Do you remember what you loved, what you hated, how you felt? Maybe like today's teens, you remember the burden of responsibility to please your parents, your teachers, your friends, feeling misunderstood, out of place at times. Do you remember the arguments you would have with your parents? Now, are they anything like the ones you have with yours, if you have any? The apple doesn't fall too far. As grown-ups, we often feel like teenagers and young adults don't fall in line, right? You can't tell them anything. They think they know everything. They always got a bad attitude, which was true of every generation. Come on. But today's teens, they are a special breed, aren't they? But the expectations that we grew up with, they just don't fall in line with that way of thinking. They're entitled, soft. Like, where did we go wrong? Yeah. It's a question I struggled with often as my daughter became a teenager and then a teenage adult. No longer physically beating myself, but still verbally lashing out within. I had umpteen years and legit experience working with teens. Why can't I do this right? We would get into so many arguments over decisions and choices she would make, of which, of course, I'm right because I'm mom. I've been where you haven't. I've seen more of the world. I'm more experienced. I know what I'm talking about. And you just haven't rationalized it yet because your brain is still developing. While there's absolutely truth to that, I realized one day, after a bit of personal growth, that oftentimes that frustration I would feel was partly because deep down, I was afraid that if that decision she made turned out to be a really bad one, it would mean she had been incapable of making the right one because I didn't do a good enough job teaching her how. I hadn't been good enough as a parent. And that in the end, that very fear that I had about myself would be true. I was worthless. I was useless. And I couldn't do anything right. Not even be a good parent, a good mom. I had made my expectations of her a cover for my inner fears and ego. And it was such an awakening. I felt so bad. And at the same time, so free. And I owned it. And I went to apologize to her. And do you know what she said? She said, I know. And I understood that her pushback in our arguments wasn't just pushback against my advice. It was pushback against the projection of my low self-belief onto her. How many of you are secretly, subconsciously projecting onto your kiddos, your teens and young adults? And how many of their pushback is pushback against that projection? Nothing and no one is perfect. But I've seen firsthand the importance of teens and young adults knowing their worth in spite of our fears and insecurities as parents and carers. Expectations do have a place, but they are more than behavior and effort. It's also about identity and self-perception. What if it's not that today's teens are entitled, but they have expectations of their own? And we just need to manage ours better and help them manage theirs. What if it's not that they're soft, but they have standards, and we just need to raise ours and support theirs? Just a thought or two. Regardless, don't dismiss what they're going through, and don't underestimate them. Teenagers and young adults, even today's teenagers and young adults, are inherently great and inherently capable of doing great things. May not often seem like it, but like the Transformers, they're more than meets the eye. Let's help them realize it. Thank you.